You're watching Sitka Community TV. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like what you see.
So we'll get started. Thank you all for being here. This is the beginning of what's sure to be a long process on making sure we get commercial transportation figured out. I think I've said it before. I was calling this changes in taxi code for about 2 years and started to realize that it's much more than just a change in taxi code. It's a change in commercial transportation because things have changed over the years. I mean, we started with some taxi concerns about 2.5 years ago. We were right in the middle of COVID. That kind of put on the back burner, and then tourism picks back up, and people started traveling more, and more issues started to get exposed. And then we had this big travel boom this year, and there's more people that need transportation now. So it's kind of the wild, wild west out there right now, and we're really just trying to figure out how to address all this. So I'm happy you're all here to help with that. As I've said before, we really need the input from the providers, the users, visitors, residents, everybody on what should go into a set of regulations to help provide commercial transportation here in Sitka. So I'm going to read just straight from the purpose section of a very, very draft version of an ordinance that's out there, and we'll start here. But the purpose is to encourage safe, convenient, and effective commercial passenger vehicle services, establish standards for drivers and operational standards for commercial passenger vehicle services, authorize promulgation of regulations to implement the ordinance, and then first and foremost to protect the public safety. So what I'd like to do tonight, Assemblymember Pike is going to facilitate, and really what we're going to start with is we'd like to hear from you all on defining a problem statement, really. We want to do an as-is analysis. What does commercial transportation look like right now? Where are the gaps? Where are the issues? Where can we do better? And we're going to try to summarize that up here. And then after we define that problem statement, then we're going to move ahead with asking you all, what are some solutions? How can we address these things? What are things we could implement to improve service overall here in Sitka for our locals and for our visitors? So with that, Mr. Pike, you want to come on up and get started?
Thank you. So I've got a couple of additional goals for tonight, one of which is, I don't like to be in meetings that don't accomplish something generally. And so my goal here for us tonight is to get to some solutions and to hear from you about what these things are.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Absolutely. I can speak louder. I try not to, so people don't, people are like, slow down a little bit, because I do work in a shop. So, this regulation came out, and it came out sort of, I think people thought kind of in a vacuum, but it really wasn't in a vacuum. This was an idea to get us started with this conversation, and I think the reaction that we've seen to it clearly indicates that while this may not be the regulation we're looking for, we definitely do need to define a little bit better for everyone kind of where we're headed. So I think that's really kind of my goal for tonight too. I'd really like to hear some about what the problems with transportation are. I recognize that this 45-page thing that was sent out might be a bit overwhelming, but the general idea is to make sure that we provide the Sitka solution to what this looks like. We do need to keep going forward with what the regulations need to look like. So I'll open it up for sort of a definition of what you see as a problem or problems with transportation, commercial transportation here in Sitka.
Could you just introduce who's...
Sure, yeah. Sorry about that.
Could we have the music turned off?
Yeah, they're working on that, Laurie.
Sure. My name is Tim Pike. I'm one of the assembly members, and I'm also the liaison to the Police and Fire Commission, which is where this proposal was first presented for public comment, and it will go back to them again, and we'll come back again. I think John alluded to the fact that this is the beginning of a process. We're just at the beginning of this, so if this is not reflective of where we want to go, then that's what we want here too.
I'm Kevin Mosher, another assembly member. Of course, that's John Leach. He's the municipal administrator. He works for the assembly as a whole. And this is Sarah Peterson, the clerk for the city, and Serena, executive assistant for the police department. She's going to be recording some of this for us. Tim, did you have in mind that people just speak up, or we can see if that microphone is up?
It works. We have this if anybody needs it.
Sure.
but-
I think, yeah.
I want to get done inspired.
It's not working. Sorry, we're gonna work on getting that.
I can just talk.
Okay.
I'm really tired. I worked all day.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, Mr. Leach had a wonderful idea in throwing this out and starting over. I would like to meet with some of the assembly or something and talk about the problem small businesses have keeping up and what would help in the tour companies. And, and encourage small businesses. And I think this is going to end all taxis in Sitka. You'll have to go to Uber and Lyft. Nobody's going to do this because they can't. So I think we need to, I'm tired, I don't want to talk all night, but there is no way the taxi companies can follow this. I know them and they're not going to do it, they're just all going to go to tours, I think. So I don't think Uber and Lyft are going to keep up either. I was down in Bellevue, it was all Uber and Lyft, and when it was bad weather, they didn't come. I had to pay $35 with Lyft to go 2 miles. So, and they're not going to come out, they don't feel like it. So I think we need to talk to the people that are providing the services and come up with something reasonable. And also the tour companies. Most of them are too tired to come in here right now. We need to meet with them and have something that would work for them. And I think that's all I'm going to say because I'm about ready to go home and go to sleep. But I would really like to see small businesses in Sitka, not just big businesses. And we can't get any help for our tax companies, just like CMART can't find any help. There's nobody to work anywhere. Everybody's leaving Sitka, they don't have any money. If the fares go up, they can't do it. I drive people around for way under fare in the winter. And if you have a meter or something, you'll have to charge it. You can't get 2 or 3 people to economize on fuel. This is not workable. And I think all the cab companies will just quit. So I don't think Uber and Lyft will be able to do it either. So I have no idea what your plans are, but they can't find work over at CMART. You can't even get the stuff out of the refrigerator. They can't get anybody to work. Blake told me he can't find anybody to work. Everybody that's marginal is leaving town, and the rich people are coming, but they don't need cabs.
So the
Anyway, that's all I have to
question was,
say.
what's the as, what are the problems? How can I summarize what the problem is right now?
We need
Right.
somebody to meet with the taxi people and the
That's,
tour people.
that's what we're doing right now.
Well, they're not here. They're tired.
They haven't started the meeting, but.
We're gonna have lots of meetings. There'll be, just how do I summarize the as is, what's,
To throw this out and meet with us and start over on something that would keep the taxi companies working. Otherwise, there won't be any.
so again, what is the as is problem that I can write up here?
The taxi companies are all going to quit if you put this in.
No, that's not a, that's a if. What is right now, what is the problem that I can summarize?
There are
up
no,
here?
oh,
So no, okay, that's good, that's an answer. No problems. That's
there
one.
are no taxis.
Okay, no taxis, all right.
There are
So-
no taxis. And Mary, I'm not trying to down, like, you guys, you and Sig are always there. Like, there are taxis. I don't mean to say that like that. And people try their darnest to get, they pick and choose who they want to pick up. They don't, they're not there. They're just
Stand
not.
up, please, for the TV. If you're
Oh.
going to talk from the audience, please stand
Oh, I
up.
didn't know that it was like that. Sorry. Sorry, y'all. Gosh, I didn't. Now I'm on the spot. Thanks, Rachel. Again, Mary, Sid, everybody. My name's Sharon, and I just wanted to say that there is no taxis. I feel like they pick and choose who they want to pick up, and if you call them, they may or might not show up. And this is like from every aspect of as a Sitkan. And like if you have to go to the airport, if you have to go to the local grocery store, and if you're in walking distance, or if you have to carry like 50, things of groceries, like and you need a ride home, you can't call a taxi because they will be going to give tours right
So
now.
does this statement reflect what you're saying?
It does. There are no taxis. There's no taxis. There's no availability.
Okay.
And I think that perfectly sums it up, and that's really what I'm here to see how we could get to the bottom of that solution is.
And, you know, to go along with the other
And I'm
comment.
not trying to down her because they are there whenever we need them, but that's what, maybe at the middle of the night, you know, when people need rides in the middle of the day. And that's the problem.
Thank you.
Maybe a problem statement that could kind of summarize that is that the lack of taxi availability is affecting quality of life in Sitka.
Yeah, correct.
Is it less available at certain times of the year and more available at other, or
Correct.
is it
Yeah.
just inconsistent in general?
Yeah, no, it's, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I'll answer that. Summer is a lot worse now, especially now that it's not like COVID. I mean, bless them, you know, I hope they're getting the most money they can. But now that there's not COVID and there's a lot of tourists, we don't get that. We don't have that luxury of, you know, having that and then having to go get our groceries, having to go out the road or anywhere we actually, and go to the airport if we have to be there by 6 a.m. There's no availability.
Okay.
But what I was
You got a
gonna-
comment?
comment on is coming in late at night. For 16 years, I worked at the airport. I was the general manager for Aero Services. I had a parking spot. It didn't affect me. Now it does, because I can't park more than 7 days. That's probably another issue we resolve with the airport and what goes on there, obviously. But yeah, at night, there's a lot of people waiting for cabs that can't get a cab. And I've had friends are picking me up and say, hey, can you get these two people to Point B? So we've got to address good transportation for the airport early in the morning, late at night, and then just throughout the day. Sometimes early in the morning you can get a cab, middle of the day, not so much. Early evening, yes, if it gets later evenings, there's establishments that, yes, they need to get their patrons home safely, and so they're not doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And that's what it seems to be a problem, and are we making it economical for both the customer and the business? And does it make sense for
Absolutely.
them when you're doing their fare structures?
Right.
And the ability to piggyback is what I'd call it. Got 3 people need to go out HBR, one's gonna stop here, one's gonna stop there, one's gonna stop there, they all share, and they have a rate, zone rate, and they all pay their zone rate. Maybe a tip, but you know, that's be given. That helped, but a lot of us don't think it's attractive for somebody to drive if they can't make money. So make sure you get the fair rate, the economics of both sides, the customer and the business operator.
Absolutely.
And the airport was the other.
And the airport as well.
I do want to be clarified, we're not here just to bash taxis, you know. So,
Okay. Another thing that I feel like I know there's a policeman in the, thank you for your service.
He's taking notes.
And sorry. I feel like, I don't want to call it, in my head, it seems like it's a conspiracy because it's like, if you do go to the bar, which everyone does go out and they have a few drinks, and then how are you gonna get home? And then if you can't get a hold of a taxi and you call the police and say, hey, these people just need to get home safely, they are like, oh, that's not our problem. It seems like, okay, well, how else are they gonna get home? They're more inclined to drive home and then they'll pull them over, which seems like they get money, the city gets money, and it's like, it just seems like so much is going on that it's not conducive to be a citizen tax paying citizen here.
so this reflects this again, then?
Correct.
I would say safety too, if I saw right.
Safety.
We're talking about safety. But can I clarify something real quick?
Yes, sir.
If a person gets pulled over in that instance, like we were talking about, chief, does the city get any money from that, or is that a state statute that we're enforcing?
City gets no money from it, and we're not, lurking around waiting for people.
I'm
to leave the
not
car.
saying it, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make, all I wanted to do was clear the air on that one,
Okay,
to just make
thank
sure
you.
that there's no, we're not trying to pull people over, there's no such thing as like quotas, and we're trying to, you know,
Yeah.
get people on
Attorney
speeding tickets, but,
But I
Yeah.
think people do understand though, like, that's one of my heart, and I've thought about that often. Just there's people who want to go have a good time and, you know, and if you're in that exact situation, you want to be responsible, but if you can't get a cab, especially say if it's winter time, that's a very tough spot for people to be in. It's troubling.
So are there any other people with anything other than this about the taxis?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Uber, we need Uber here, we do, because the taxis, all right, they suck.
So,
Jenny has spoken.
or should we just say lack of ride share, is that a good way to summarize it?
Yeah.
What are you summarizing?
I have one.
One second.
So I've got I guess I wasn't understanding what the format was gonna be tonight, so, and I came just a couple minutes late, but do we look at the core of the problem? Why are there so few taxis? Is it hard to get a license?
Yep.
Is it hard to get drivers? Like, I read this, and I'm not coming in to attack anybody, but I read this, and as tour operators, we're about to be given harder things to go through. Harder to find drivers. If we gotta get permits for all the drivers and everything, it's gonna be harder and harder. Have you guys tried to hire people? The city's a little behind on hiring people right now, if I've talked to some of the people. This is gonna make it harder, and we need more taxis, right? Do we need to make it, not necessarily easier, but how can we make it so we have more taxis? Do we talk to the taxi drivers and say, hey, how can we get more taxis? Because I agree, it's really hard. We have people walk up to us all the time, we wanna get a taxi, we just kinda laugh, yeah, good luck. How can we fix the problem? Are we looking at what the problem is and how we can fix it? Is that what we're doing here
Yeah,
tonight?
that's what we're asking right
So,
now, is
yeah.
That's what
what are the
this
problems?
Okay, and so that's kind of what I'm looking at. So I look at the other side of that and go, okay, are we making more problems for ourselves, or are we looking to fix them? I'd love to fix them, you know?
And I think the part you missed is this is not what is happening. This is
Okay.
a base to work from, because if we just started with these flip charts and nothing in front of us,
Right?
I think we'd be doing this for 2 years before we got something together. So this is a baseline. This came from Juneau, and it works in Juneau, so we're starting there, that's all.
Okay.
But I do want to define what the problem is.
Perfect. And I think that's the main problem. We need more taxis. How can we get more taxis?
Go ahead.
I have a question about this rideshare. Are they or are they not legal, and do they or do they not pay city sales tax? It's my understanding they don't pay city sales tax and that they're not legal, and they're not gonna come out if they don't feel like it either. Because in Bellevue for 3 weeks, I had to take Uber, and I had to pay $35 to go 2 miles. The price goes up, it's not gonna be any answer for Sitka.
So, what we heard at the last meeting was that there is nothing in the code that prohibits Uber or Lyft or other rideshare programs from running in Sitka.
I understand the police just sent a cease and desist to the Lyft driver.
Could be for a lot of
That was
different
one
reasons.
person who's probably operating.
Could be a lot of different reasons.
I don't know, I just would
Yeah,
like
I
to
don't know.
clarify, are they or are they not legal, and do they pay city sales tax?
There is nothing in the code that precludes them operating. in
Do they
Sitka.
have to pay city sales tax?
No, I don't know the
I'm
answer.
sure we'll probably cross that bridge when we get.
Laura?
Oh, I was just gonna say, we ran into a situation today, we're defined as a shuttle, because we went through the taxi application, they reviewed our application, we did all of those things, and then we were defined as a shuttle. So, but I got a call from somebody today who wanted a lift from C-Mart to the harbor, and I had to say, we're a shuttle, we can't take you. And they said, we've called 7 different cab companies, they're all busy. And the reality is, the code, the ordinances that we're putting in place, we're not Juneau, we're Sitka.
Amen. Yeah.
I mean, no offense, we're Sitka. So you've taken something whole cloth from a much larger city with more resources that isn't us. And I had to tell this person, I'm really sorry, I'm not a taxi, I'm precluded from picking you up from anything that isn't one of my designated stops. You're going to have to go ahead and go with somebody else. So I'm trying to go with the ordinances as you propose them and what I was told is our definition. I know I could have more latitude than that right now because it's not actually in code yet. But the simple reality is, in making a good faith effort to follow through on this, I'm limiting what I'm doing and I'm giving less service than I could when my colleagues are strapped. And if I'm the only person available, I still have to say no because I'm not a taxi, I'm a shuttle.
So what is your statement for?
My statement is that the current ordinances, the proposed ordinances are going to make it less, like we're gonna be less of a supportive community as drivers than we would be otherwise because these definitions are limiting what we can do. So there has to be some recognition that we're a smaller, we're not Juneau, we're a smaller community and there needs to be some more latitude if we're really gonna meet everybody's needs. And people need to work together, and I would agree with what Mary said. This conversation should have happened before these ordinances were proposed and before some of us spent a lot of money getting physicals and all those other pieces. We would have been happy to give input had anybody bothered to ask us.
Dr. Weaver.
In segueing from that, I think that Mr. Leach said it all in his opening statement as he waived a 42-page document. But he also said it all when he said this is just the beginning. I think it is quite clear that from hearing and speaking with a number of folks in town who are related to this industry, is that it's overregulated. And again, I'll echo, this is Sitka. We have 14 miles of road. I'm sure people here have driven in Juneau, etc. It's a much different place. It's a lot easier to get around, and I think that the regulations really need to be, I won't say relaxed, meaning a lesser, competency, etc., but it needs to be reduced, and the competency needs, the complexity needs to disappear. Because we are very seasonal and we'll have issues related to summer and therefore issues related to winter, and we have to be flexible.
How would you write that over here?
How would I write that?
What would be your?
You got a match?
No, we put over-regulation on there, but Dr. Weedy, you mean on our current code is over-regulation?
I think everything is up for grabs. The current code needs to be looked at. These suggestions need to be looked at. And it can't be looked at in this kind of, I'll say, forum, meaning that, again, the way I might consider doing it is literally going over, and especially with the stakeholders, and going over every line. Just reading the code, reading, for example, what Juneau has, or edit what Juneau has, and how will it fit to Sitka. And it's as simple and difficult as that.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
When you're listing problems, I think we just need to recognize that there is such a disparity between the volume in summer versus winter to require people to generically comply, and expense-wise, it's from a business sense, it's not as doable, right? Because if you have all these restrictions and fees and things that make sense in the summer, they don't necessarily make sense in the winter. And so just recognizing that fact that it's very different seasonally.
So differential seasonal impact.
Yeah, so just taking that into account.
So you're thinking seasonal, possible changes in the code that allow different types of regulations during the spring versus?
Or just looking at it from, to make it affordable for people in both senses, right? Because, when there's a better volume, those things are more affordable to small businesses. But if that's a year-round commitment and all those extra things, it really makes it hard on a small business owner to have to be so restrictive, right? So maybe in the fall you can do things like airport runs when we really need them a little bit more freely or whatever. So flexibility, I guess.
And I apologize again, but you did talk about, we're still in the spitball phase right now, correct? It's not like we're in there and voting, nothing like that, right?
The only thing that exists is the current code that's in the packet there. It's all the stuff that's crossed out. So that's all that exists right now, and we're spitballing on what to do going forward.
So basically, I've come into stuff before in the past where it's already moved through quite a bit, and you come in late and it's kind of hard. So I appreciate that we are in the room talking like this and going over this, so that's really good. For those that haven't been in some of those before, this is a good phase to be in.
And you're standing in the second meeting on this particular topic ever, so we haven't spent a lot of time on this, and I mean, I think we knew when we started this that this kind of conversation was necessary, and we're certainly open to doing that. I mean, I think John said it at the beginning there too. This is the beginning. We're very much at the beginning of this process, so we do have a long way to go. The main reason we want to do this is because, I'm not part of the transportation business in Sitka, so what is the problem? Where are our issues that we need to deal with? And then what are the solutions to the problems that we have?
Yeah, this isn't Juneau, this is Sitka, and we have a labor shortage. The taxi business is no longer anything you can make a living on. Everybody driving a taxi has other businesses or resources. You're not gonna be able to tell them to sit, 4 cabs to sit out all night, 24/7. They can't go to Mexico. You aren't gonna have any hiccups. It's not, you can't make a living wage, and you can't make a living wage if you're driving for them. So you're gonna have to realize you're gonna encourage more businesses, not less. Unless the city wants to provide transportation.
My name's Rudder. I'm a 12-year taxi operator, 14 years operating taxi here. Part of my problem is I can't get night drivers to be licensed. The licensing requirements are burdensome and onerous. It costs $300 or $400 to comply with all the nonsense from the Sitka Police Department. I send people over there. They're very rarely approved. And the drivers have to do things like go to the Trooper Academy, get a copy of their criminal history, all that information, and pay for it. That information is on file on the computer. The SPD has access to that information. Then they have to go over to the DMV and get a copy of their driving record. All that's on the computer. SPD could take care of that without the drivers having to fill out all this unnecessary information and paying all these unnecessary fees. It costs too much.
So with this,
a young man driving taxi shouldn't have to take a physical for $300 every year.
so this is the sentence this is the statement that would summarize what you're
I
saying.
can't see what you're pointing at.
Overregulated.
Less than
It's
complexity.
overregulated. One cab company quit a month ago, and she said it was due to unnecessary meddling in her business by the police department.
So, I also think we got taxis, we're having all these others. We do have something else that we can utilize also out there. We do have the city ride, which I think is not stated out very well. Some people are not posted it out good enough for them to know when the bus stops are at. I mean, if you're getting off at groceries at C-Mart and you want to go out to the end of the road, the bus runs that ways. And it's affordable. It's $2 per person. So there is just a lack of knowledge of all your transportation also that's out there. I mean, granted, the ride right now is running shuttles out to the Fortress of Bear and missing half their stops. But if they do their job properly and correctly, we could have a very viable way of getting people back and forth from wherever they're at to town and back out. They run all the way out to the end, to one end of the road, all the way out to the ferry terminal. They do not run over to the island towards the airport, unfortunately, but
They do go to search.
the lack of usage is something that could be, and the knowledge of the ride could be something that we put out there a little bit more for locals to be able to use.
So your statement would be
The lack of knowledge of the ride.
of the other alternate form of transportation.
Public transportation.
So, I'm sorry, Tim, I just wanted to, it seems like he entered like also another alternative or additional problem was that the ride in the summertime does a different route or eliminates other routes that they could have been doing. Maybe that's another side issue.
Okay.
So it'd be saying there's when public transportation is over capacity, it misses stops, and I think that relates to a workforce issue. Because if you're expecting to get the ride to go to work from your neighborhood and the bus never comes, then the employee never makes it to work.
Anyone who's a bus on Oak Creek has that.
Yeah.
Well, they always skip over people because they're over capacity.
Right, right. So it's yeah.
But it is there and it is a possibility, and issues with that could also be addressed.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, today in the middle of the day, the airport, we got multiple calls. We ended up trying to go, we're a hop-on, hop-off shuttle. So we usually just do a route. We just try to pick up the people that we started with. We will do individual transports from one stop to the next for $5. But we were getting calls the whole time from the airport. We ended up breaking away and going over to the airport, and we literally, I'm not exaggerating, there were 27 people at the airport today between 1 o'clock and 2:30 who didn't have a way. Totem Square, for whatever reason, is supposed to have a free shuttle. They weren't going and picking these folks up. And then there were people for the Aspen, they didn't speak English. So we went over and just put them in the bus and took them to the Aspen. It's just, which is one of our stops, so don't, okay? Yeah, on the record. So it's a morning stop usually, but we did it during the middle of the day because these people have been there for 90 minutes. And honestly, the other piece is, I pick up people, and I wrote you guys a letter, I pick up people with scooters where their battery has died because I have a handicapped accessible lift. And I'm one of the few folks in town who does. I pick them up for free. I bring them to Crescent Harbor because that's the only place I can put my lift down. I'm tired of worrying about somebody coming out and citing me because I didn't pay my $400 or whatever it was to have a square here, and I'm driving into Crescent Harbor. It would be great if there was something in there that if you're transporting people for free as a courtesy or as a care kind of activity, that we weren't going to get in trouble because we come into Crescent or we come into the Harrigan Centennial Hall. So if there was some kind of exemption for people who are just trying to help somebody who's in a desperate circumstance, that would be awesome because it definitely adds to the stress level of what's already a really busy day.
I think you pointed out an important part with the ADA, the accessibility for people with disabilities.
So am I exempt?
No, I don't know I don't know the answer to that, but I do want to say that I mean, if I were citizen John Leach sitting out there, one of the things I'm going to say is more ADA accessible transportation options. I hear that quite a bit. I mean, we've had people at the cruise ship dock that can't get in anything to get back here with a...
Al's running an accessible shuttle. I mean, Chris has got an accessible shuttle that does that. But the reality is when they break down downtown or at the Raptor Center or over at Totem Park, I think I'm the only one who's got a lift who can wheel their scooter on board. So I don't mind doing it, and I don't tell people that I'm going to charge them. Oh, Harry. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Harry has one too. Harry and I are tight, so, but yeah, I mean, it would be great to know that if we were doing something to provide ADA accessibility, that we didn't have to worry about whether or not we already had a license to come into Crescent Harbor parking lot.
Can we put that in I know we're kind of getting ahead of it here, but can we put exemptions for public service or something?
Sure.
What's a good way to summarize it?
I think that'd be great.
Exemptions for public service or something over on the solution side.
So,
Yeah.
ADA accessibility is also available through the ride. So people who are needing to go to the grocery stores and what have you should also be able to access that. I do realize that there were problems presented with the ride, but there's got to also be solutions to that as well. And I used to drive for the ride quite a while ago. I drove for them for 5 years, and they are ADA accessible. So, and then I think the senior center provides that with appointments as well. So there's also ADA accessibility through that as well. But it's not like you can call if you're coming into town and say, hey, I'm on this ship and I just broke down, can you help me? Because they're already booked, unfortunately, but.
So does this cover all the problems we have with transportation in Sitka?
I think he has something to say.
Okay.
How it's easier to get a,
Yeah, well, seemed to me, I've had a CDL for a long time. It seemed it was easier to get a commercial driver's license with a hazmat endorsement than it sounds like to get your taxi done. Part of that is, of course, my company paid for it, but it just seemed a little easier, a little less complex, a little less paperwork.
Well,
So the DMV, it's a one-stop shop. And, well, I think the police department used to do it. I don't think they do it anymore for our fingerprints for TSA.
Okay.
I think I have to go somewhere else this time than I was somewhere. I can't remember now. But this seemed easier to get a commercial license than it is to get a taxi license in some ways to me.
Right.
Or if you already have a commercial driver's license with a passenger endorsement, does that mean we still have to go through all these other processes to operate a shuttle or a taxi? Or could you make it a regulation, hey, if you have that commercial driver's license with a passenger endorsement, could that not be used along with your medical you already have?
Right.
Because you're required to have a medical to keep your commercial license.
Makes sense. Go ahead.
I was going to say that one of the problems that I've heard and experienced myself is the disparity in costs to go in between the same places. I've paid $25 to get to my house, and I've paid $8 to get to my house. Just depends on who picks me up. And we've also heard that at the visitor center. We've heard wild amounts of money that taxis have charged people to go to different places in town. So, yeah, just wild west of costs is kind of what it feels like out there.
The one thing that's added on that goes back to what I was talking about, making it economically reasonable. Is there a possibility that we can make an easier adjustment to the fares as costs go up? When we have a spike in gas prices, and you've seen that happen.
Sure.
So, sir, maybe a problem would be not a flexibility in for costs as they change.
Well, it kind of sounds like a solution, actually. You know, tying fares to inflation or something like that. So.
Everybody in town can't afford more money, and you've got to leave us the option of not charging them. Somebody going to work every day that's probably going to leave town because they can't afford it. You've got to leave us the option of not charging them that much, which you can't do with a taxi.
Go ahead.
My name is Brian Hansen. I'm the municipal attorney, and I'm listening very carefully to what everyone's saying here tonight. One of my major roles as a municipal attorney is as a risk manager. And I look at legislation like this to see whether or not we're doing our duty to the public. And our duty to the public is, job one is safety. And in order to effectuate safety through our regulations, we have to do things like require background checks for the drivers, require vehicle inspections for the vehicles, and require insurance for those vehicles to make sure that if we're going to allow this commercial activity on the streets of Sitka, that that risk is properly identified and taken care of with those type of things. So what I'm hearing here is there's some complaints about the cost of compliance with those regulations, the over-regulation. And I'm not a taxi cab driver, nor I ever have, nor I ever delved deeply into it. But what I would like to know from the providers here is what do you propose that we do to make it less expensive but still meet our requirements for safety? Still be able to have safe people drive those vehicles that have background checks. Still require them to have their vehicles checked. Still required to have their physical capabilities checked, and still require them to have insurance. And, you know, that's what I'm looking for. So I'd like some feedback on that.
I'd like to address Mr. Hansen's concerns.
Well, one of the things that I would say is that there should be reciprocity between people who already have had those background checks. So if somebody's currently working for the school district or for the city and they've already had those background checks, the police department should accept that as part of the application process instead of requiring the person to spend the additional $35 or whatever. Honestly, our drivers were all current employees of the school district. If the principal of the middle school had been convicted of a felony, my guess is that would have been a bigger issue for him than whether or not he got a taxi license. So there should be some kind of reciprocity if they already have that information on file with the city, the school district, or anybody else who requires it. I think that would be one way. And I'm not just talking about people who are high profile. We have paraeducators who have to have background checks, other people who need that summer employment. That would be one way to keep people fully employed year-round without having that additional cost burden. So I would suggest that that's one way. And I think anything else that folks are able to do to show that good faith effort would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to go and get all these reports year after year. I mean, I have to go every year, my drivers have to go every year and pay money for a criminal history from the Trooper Academy. All that's on the computer. We shouldn't be charged for that. I'm getting a little weary of hearing public safety bandied about as a blanket to cover all of these proposals. I've seen taxi operators licensed in this community that had 6 felony convictions. They didn't last very long. They were criminals to begin with. I've seen one tour driver driving cab for a local firm here that had 2 felony convictions for stabbing people. So I don't really want to hear all this about public safety. I think the concern here is more who gets to do these things. Last spring I was told that I could not keep the words tour, taxi, or shuttle on the side of my vehicle, that I had to remove them. I immediately saw other firms coming up, new companies offering the same services. I see people permitted as shuttles, performing the duties of taxis. All of these definitions are arbitrary and capricious. I've provided taxi, tour, and shuttle services in this community for 14 years. And now all of a sudden this year, because Chief Beatty or
Me.
You
I did it.
think you have a better idea than the way things have been working for the last 14 years. Over at the airport, there is one assigned stall for taxi parking, and every 2 years, the police come over there and tell us we can't park in front of the terminal, or the transportation lady from the state comes, and then they chase us around for 2 weeks, then they leave, everything goes back to the way it was for the previous 5 years, and things just sort themselves out.
So if you're saying once a person is a taxi driver, they should be considered that.
I can't hear you.
So once a person is a taxi driver, they should be considered that going forward.
Well, once a person is a taxi driver, he shouldn't have to prove every year that he's not a criminal. Because the police department here has all that on record. Okay. They have his DMV records. They don't need to require us to duplicate those records every single year. A young man in peak physical condition shouldn't have to get a $300 physical every single year. I mean, I don't mind people like me, old people, who go in and get a physical and show that they're still fit to drive. But a young guy that's 21 years old shouldn't have to spend $500 every year to get his permits.
Okay. I think we got that.
Can I ask you a question real quick on the physical?
Go ahead.
I'm just going to ask one quick question on the physical thing, because I dealt with commercial operations with motor vehicles for 25 years. Every CDL driver, no matter what, 21 or 60 has it. Usually it's 2 years if you're in good health. 1 year if you have other medical conditions. That's something you probably can't override.
Go ahead.
Back to the question that he was asking about what our ideas and thoughts are about the safety. So when I read the paperwork, it talked about who was needing, so the paperwork coming from Juneau, it sounds like, and it sounds like it's for all the commercial operators, but not any of like the charter guys or the shuttle guys or the lodges or anything. So if it's about safety, we don't care about the charter guys. We hope that their van's wrecked and they all have issues. Let's make it about everybody. That's what I'm reading. So why are the shuttle operators not needing to be fit and healthy versus, you see what I'm saying? Let's have it same across the board.
Sure. Is that a rhetorical question, or do you want me to?
No, I'm saying,
Okay.
so that's how it reads. Is that not correct, or?
I mean, and I reached out to Juneau because I kind of want to answer this one. I did talk to them about it, and it's because that, let's say it's a charter running for a specific hotel, that in itself is their business and a service they provide in their business. So they are the ones, in terms of like what Mr. Hansen was saying, they're the ones absorbing the risk. So if their van crashes, that business was providing that service.
Right.
For a specific facility. Here in public transportation throughout Sitka, we are the umbrella allowing a transportation service to operate on our roads for hire, so that's where we have to absorb some of that liability. That's why some of those regulations extend to the different areas.
Is that only because we're coming onto city property? Because if we are a company, you see what I'm saying? We have our own insurance, we absorb it ourselves. So that's where it gets kind of gray, and where the whole safety thing is, if we want it to be safe. Do you see what I'm saying? We want everybody to be safe.
It's just a matter of where the liability belongs. That's why, at least that was their response to it.
So, and that's something, so that's Juneau's response. That's something we, I think, should look at and say, okay, you know, everybody should probably be healthy and safe. Because I mean, I've been in transportation for 20 years and had a CDL and all that, and anything 15 passenger and under, you don't need so we're requiring more than the transportation industry requires for a small town. So we're kind of, like as you talked about, we're getting into more than we even really need to be doing.
Okay, go ahead, and then you.
Yeah, so Caleb, Alaska Coach Tours. I think that's been the case for, well, it's my 7 years. The police department's required a vehicle inspection of my motor coaches that have a DOT inspection, a federal inspection that we have to do and provide to the federal government, saying that the vehicle is fit to operate. But then on top of that, I have to provide this city money and time, my time, to show that it's fit to operate. When I already do that, it's already federally regulated. Again, commercial operators, they have medical certificates federally required. Just take that. Insurance, just take that. It's silly that everything that's already federally mandated and regulated, you're asking for it again. Like, it's already there. We already have the processing in place. It works. Everything's covered. All the boxes are checked. So I shouldn't have to go ask a driver again to go, even this what is it called? A certificate of convenience and a permit. They're licensed. We background check at Alaska Coach Tours. Take our background check. Why isn't that enough? Why should I have to go again and get some more paperwork and do one more thing? Honestly, most of my staff come from the lower 48. We're here for the summer. It's $70 to do a medical certificate. Anywhere else, in my experience in the Western United States, it's $300 in Sitka. I can get it for $70 anywhere else. It's $300. So I would say, don't show up with that one, because that's my cost. We cover that cost for the driver. So if they're coming here, it's $250 to $300 a pop. Drug testing is the same way. We drug test everybody. It's commercially regulated, federally regulated. So again, 2 weeks out, I can't even drug test people in Sitka because there's no availability. And again, the cost is astronomical. So I think you're taking on issues that, at least in my space, I'm not a taxi driver. We're not dictated as shuttles. We're a tour operator. I think we could help in some capacities in the summer, but we can't, because again, we're not We're not deemed those things, so I can't operate in those worlds. But I have vehicles, and I have drivers, and I have the availability to help, but you won't let me. I can't go to the airport at midnight and pick up people. We have people, the Ocean Victory guests, all the time. Lauren, Victoria over there can say it countless times. 60, 70, 80-year-old people are walking to the Aspen Hotel at midnight because there's no access to transportation. I can't provide transportation. It's not within my purview. So I think there's just so much that you're just trying to over-regulate. When it's the regulations are there. Sig over there, he's been doing this for 15 years. Why reinvent the wheel? Sitka works if you let Sitka do its job. These people, all of us in this room, want to do what's best for Sitka. And I'm an outsider, and I agree. Where I can help, I will. But I also can't go against policy or regulation.
Well, I just want to be clear that the current regulation is what is in the code now. So the whole point of this exercise and the whole point of this, what we're doing here, is to make sure that we, this is the kind of conversation that we need to have in order to understand how we can make this work. Like if you have got spare capacity, how do we leverage that? That's absolutely what we're talking about, so that we don't silo ourselves up in these things. But you're right now, that's the way it is. But our goal here is...
I think it's way more, we're treating this more of like it's a competitor. We're not competitors. We're collaborators. We have to collaborate to survive. And if we aren't going to come together as a community, and me being an outsider, I live here 7 months of the year, but I am hell-bound to make sure that Sitka survives.
Absolutely. Good.
So duplication of service, of regulations should go on that. I don't know if you have it.
Okay.
I can, whatever you want, I already have. I shouldn't have to go do it again.
Gotcha.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sorry. Are there pilots in the room? I know I've heard a CDL driver is a good parallel. Any pilots or know anything about pilot licensing? And I mean, that's a form of transportation. There's two types of pilot's license. You can get a 91 or a 135. One carries passengers, one carries cargo. And the question came up as, why do I have to do this every year? And why do I have to get my vehicle inspected every year? I know one's an aircraft and one's on the ground. I get that. But the FAA requires those exact same things. They have to make sure that I am healthy every single year. I mean, I was just telling the story earlier. I had an incident in flight coming out of altitude, and I lost hearing in one ear because of the pressure change and couldn't stand up straight and couldn't walk. But if I didn't go get that annual flight physical, how would the person signing my pilot's license know that I was not okay and not able to provide that transportation? Or we had to get annual inspections on our aircraft. I'm not saying we need to go that same route, but I just wanted to kind of put out there, and I'm pointing to you because you bring up the CDL thing a lot. There are already federal requirements on some of these cases, and I think there are some efficiencies there that, hey, if you come in with a CDL and say, I'm already authorized to carry passengers, makes sense to me. I mean, it's going on the list here, so I love hearing that. But
sorry. Yes, you.
Something you might not know about the airport, and I don't know how many people feel like this, I'm done going over there. You go over there and they act like you're a criminal. Don't park here, they come out, harass you. What, for $10? No, I won't go, I don't care, I am not gonna go to the airport. They come out, there's nowhere to park, they come out, oh, you can't park here, I'm from the such and such. Then 3 weeks later, they go away, someone else comes. This has been going on for years. I'm just done going to the airport, period.
should we put taxi bank up there?
No, I mean, really.
We can have a lineup like they do over in Juneau.
Yeah.
In front of the smoking shed, there could be 3 or 4 places for taxis to line up.
They act like you're selling drugs.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking about all the permitting and regulations that you're talking about, and as a commercial fisherman, I was just thinking about what we need to do every year to get, to continue to fish. And basically that is be Coast Guard approved, have a Coast Guard inspection, renew and pay for our permits, and renew our insurance. And I mean, it sounds similar in that, as a commercial business, there are things, we have to be Coast Guard approved, we have to have everything checked out, so.
They're talking about parking taxis. TSA regulates what happens to total return. That's beyond the control of the city or the state. But you have to follow TSA regulation.
I'm happy
25
to
years
work
in
with
aviation.
Yeah, I was gonna point out that the enforcement of the stuff at the airport is all state related, so.
TSA.
Yeah, and we're working through that process. I want to help with that one.
So I keep hearing about the costs of all these things, and I guess, forgive me for living under a rock, but as a CDL driver for 27 years, I've happily paid my health certificates, I've paid my background checks, and I'm a public servant in more than one way. I'm a foster parent, I drive tours, I drove for the city ride, I drove for school functions and what have you. And these aren't things that I've actually ever thought about being burdensome, because at the same time, these things allow you to have a job. And I don't have a lot of money by any means, and not having to spend all that money would be nice. But at the same time, I want to know that I'm healthy and that I'm providing the best service that I can in my job. I mean, I would hate to not be healthy and hop on a bus, and next thing you know, I'm off in the ditch with a whole crew of people on board with me. So I guess I'm not understanding the real issue with having to pay those fees, because as a responsibility of being a decent human being, I want to know myself that these things are an issue. But is there programs that nobody's bringing up that might be able to help people who can't afford to do these things? I'm just curious.
It's a good idea. We'll take a
Put
look.
it on the board.
Go ahead.
I just had a question. With the flight licensing and checks and all of that, is that also required for the city, like for float plane operators that use the harbor? Do they have to also get permits like this from the city in addition to the FAA permits?
You know what, that's a good question. No,
I just wonder.
Yeah. I mean, they're technically not providing transportation around here, but that's FAA regulated, but I see your point.
I think
I just wondered if.
aviation is controlled by the FAA,
Yeah.
and the administrator. They have to comply with that. The city has probably passenger fees for coming in and out. That's probably how they collect fees.
Laura.
I think what we're all talking about is reciprocity. Like if somebody, I think everybody should be getting an annual physical, but if you can produce your annual physical and submit that as part of your paperwork, that should be enough. You shouldn't have to go and get an extra physical in order to be in compliance with the police department. Or if your vehicle has been inspected, like Caleb was talking about, and meets federal regulations, like we bought our bus down in Washington State. They've got a lot more regulations than Alaska, which was very interesting to me. But it came with this whole checklist of things that had already been checked. But I still had to take it to Foreign Auto at a cost in order to get it checked. So I think what we're talking about is reciprocity, that if you're already doing these things, an annual physical is probably not too much to ask for somebody who's going to be driving someone. But if they already have one, they should be able to present that paperwork instead of doing something special.
Behind you just a second. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yes, just as a member of the public, sitting in and listening, considering all the suggestions there, I wanted to know if and when the questions that you think are worth changing, when and where will those be done? Is it in the city weekly meeting, or do you take a vote, or how will this be instituted to consider good suggestions to change?
Well, we're going to have probably more of these town halls. There's probably going to be targeted outreach. I'll talk to the shuttle companies after we're going to summarize these notes. We're going to go back to police and fire. I think, what's the next meeting, Greg? The end of the... Yeah, it's the last Wednesday of every month. We'll talk about it there. But none of the changes happen until it takes place at the assembly table and there's 2 rounds of voting on the ordinance. But that's what we're doing right now, is helping to build that. So I would imagine moving fast. I don't think we'll have anything done within 6 months. So we've got lots of time and lots of opportunities for public input.
Okay, I wanted to say, I haven't had problems with TSA over at the airport. It's somebody else, the DOT lady was yelling at me that just being incredibly rude, and I'm not gonna go there anymore. I'm like, it's, TSA is fine. It's somebody else, and then they're gonna own the parking lot there, and just incredibly rude. And I just thought, TSA is no problem. It's,
I just wanted to piggyback on there and point out about the physical, just to keep in mind that I've never had insurance that would pay for a Coast Guard physical or a CDL physical, which we've both had to have. Whereas our annual physical is covered, so by our insurance, right? So just keeping that in mind that, you know, it is cost prohibitive. If you have insurance, you're paying for that, you get the physical. If they could accept it, it'd be great, because the other is out of pocket always. They do not cover it with your health insurance.
So have we got all the problems that we need to deal with right now?
the airport.
I think we have that on there.
You do.
TSA tells them what they
Not
have to do.
TSA, it's
No,
not
TSA tells them what they have to do. I worked at the airport 25 years.
The lady from the state came and
Yes,
yelled.
she has to follow TSA's regulations.
So the airport.
TSA have inspectors.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the
Another
city
problem?
is now requiring us, they want us to insure that portion of the to insure the portion of the Centennial Hall that my 4.5-foot high freestanding sign is situated on. And my local insurance dealer, Carl Stedman, tells me that's gonna cost me $1,000. And my question is, why should I have to insure any property at Centennial Hall? And they say, oh, well, somebody could trip over your sign. I mean, that's just a hypothetical problem that just is approaching nil in the possibility that it would ever happen. Nobody's gonna trip over a 4.5-foot high white plastic sign, 3 foot wide, 4.5 foot wide. Why am I being required to insure property at Centennial Hall belonging to the municipality of Sitka? Nobody's gonna hurt themselves with tripping over my sign.
We already have insurance too. We already have a kind of insurance.
Go ahead.
I guess the only point that I would like to bring up, and I don't know if I necessarily put this under problems, but I would like just to make sure that there's much thought put into implementation and enforcement, because you can make all of the changes, you can write a whole new code. The city can have the best code, you know, in the world and pass it, but if there's no enforcement, then I just don't even see the point in the process.
Right, yeah. Makes sense.
For what it's worth, in part of my draft and my little pencil notes as I write this out, I've talked to you two, I know, because we've been working on it, and I've talked to the chief. Once we implement some changes, I was planning on at least a year for everybody to get in compliance and kind of a crawl and get up to that point. So I wanted to give everybody a really long grace period before we made any changes.
And that's generous. I just think with the police department, like where they are right now with struggles with enforcement, with other issues, even just like parking issues and whatnot, if you're putting all the onus on the police chief and the police department, unless you're gonna add staffing, I don't know how that enforcement is going to, you know, be able to really be implemented, so.
Good point. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to second her ideas about enforcement that should be on the list up there. The city, these proposed ordinances, they jump the gun and they want to and require us to have meters in our taxi cabs. There's no place here in town that sells meters. There's no technicians to install or maintain them. And the real problem is that their police are not enforcing the ordinances that we already are required to follow the city rate schedule. At least one company wrote their own rate schedule. They didn't think the city's was high enough, so they tacked on $10 here, $20 there. All these people suing the city over these rates. I've grossed as much as $250,000 in a year following the city rate schedule. The idea that we need to double or triple the cab rates is a preposterous solution. The police just need to enforce the existing ordinances.
Fair enough. Would it help if the city bought the meter?
Why do we have to have meters? I've been selling taxi, tour, and shuttle services for 14 years. Say there's 3 couples over at the airport. I'm restricted, I can only charge them like $10 for a ride to town. My solution to that is I charge them shuttle service. I get them all in the car together, all 6 of them. I charge them $5 each. That's $10 per couple. That's all I'm allowed to charge them. The way you guys have it envisioned is I'll have to put a meter in my car and take them 2 at a time. Well, that would defeat the whole purpose of buying a expensive minivan. I might as well buy a Prius if I'm going to take them 2 at a time. I'm not gouging anybody if I charge them $5 each. That's what it costs. I'm entitled to make a profit. I invested $20,000, $30,000 in these vans. And I should be able to charge shuttle prices like I have for the last 14 years. For you guys to come in and arbitrarily and unilaterally decide all these definitions, that's just plain wrong.
Okay, so I think we have that covered over here in terms of complexity of regulations. So I get what you're saying.
Enforcement, she was mentioning enforcement.
And we have that down now too.
The police department can't even enforce bicycle ordinances.
With the meter, I also wanted to say, you can't give anyone a good deal. I have a lot of people that can't afford to live here. I'll charge them way under what a meter, I'm not gonna turn the meter on and pay for them to go. And then if they're picking up 2 or 3 people, which of course saves the planet and gas, what are you gonna do? You can't do that either? That's just not gonna work for Sitka. I don't care what worsens you, this is Sitka.
Okay. I did explore, because I wanted to find that out.
Yeah.
We talked in my office. I thought about putting a line in the budget to enhance transportation here, look into the cost of purchasing meters from the city and issuing them to the taxi drivers
I'm saying if
to
you
help
have
with
a
that.
meter, you can't charge less. How are you gonna charge way under?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and how are
So
you gonna
a
pick
meter
up 2 or
just set, I think.
how are you
is
gonna
like
pick
that.
up 2 or 3 people at the same time? In the winter, these people here don't have any money. I can charge under now, but if you're gonna put a meter in, I'm not going to pay for them.
Gotcha.
And then it's said on there, you have to do the taxes. Our drivers pay their own taxes. This is ridiculous. They're private contractors, they take care of their taxes, they pay their taxes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you're doing any data gathering and considering like the projections for next year when you're looking at solving the problems. Like, are you doing any sort of, I don't know, like traffic, monitoring or whatever, like that municipalities do, however they're the best way to do that, to see what the capacity problem is in actual numbers, to address that? Or we just kind of like, I see what we're doing here as far as what we feel the problems are, but is there any like real hard numbers being gathered as to how we're gonna address the future?
We've completed a traffic study already that we're still digesting to build into the next years. And it's interesting the taxi meters came up. That's one of those tools that if we had, we could get usage data that'd be helpful. Right now, it's just reach out individually and say, hey, here's your quarterly sales tax report, or we look at a ledger that people write down. But that's only as accurate as what the person's writing down there, and it's I don't know if it's concrete enough data, but if there are ideas on
Like,
better
what
things
about
we
us
could do to
saying,
get that.
I would be willing to keep track of how many people I turn down. I think, you're, like, how many calls a day are you rejecting because we can't, like, you know what I'm saying? And we're all the ones sort of that would field those calls anyway. I would be happy to say, okay, I got 10 calls this day and I turned down this many people or whatever. Just to give you some data to work from, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Let us have it, yeah.
Dispatch services, that's that's one of the things we would hope for is taxi meters and dispatch services. Somebody we can talk to and call and find out, what are you turning down, what are you collecting?
There's no money for a dispatch. That's like talking about, there is no money to pay a dispatcher. This is a marginal business. Nope, you're not gonna find anyone to do it, and there's no money to pay them. I just get calls, I have it on my steering wheel, I just press it. It's hands-free. I do my own dispatching.
Laura?
I was just gonna say, I'm not positive I agree with that. I think that there's some kind of, I mean, especially in the summer, if we were just doing dispatching in the summer months when there's really a challenge at the airport and other places, it might be something worthy of exploring. But the other piece is on a huge, I hate to throw this out there, but on an umbrella level, you know, we're talking about how this is the wild, wild west of pricing. I get that. And I think, you know, from what I sent you, that we have a real structure, and I like to think that we're an affordable alternative for families. And that's our main priority. But I really wonder whether or not, if the city were, I'm looking at the difference between what you're trying to do with transportation and what people who are street vendors are doing, or what people who are in stores are doing. And the fact that I understand that there needs to be fairness and that we need to make sure people don't get taken advantage of, but at the same time, I think if the city engages in overreach of setting rates and establishing what people are allowed to pay, I kind of think that's a slippery slope. I mean, when you guys decide to tell how much of a markup people downtown can have on their products, I mean, I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation to have. So I think it's tough when you start regulating one industry. I don't want price gouging. I don't want people taken advantage of. I think it would be very fair to say that we should all display our rates in large font on our vehicles, and that everybody should know what they're getting before they get into our vehicle. But when you start talking about establishing how much we can charge, I think you're really looking at interfering with a free market system that you wouldn't be talking about that with any other industry. So I think it's something that we should consider before we kind of head down that pathway.
Absolutely, I don't think, I mean, you've encapsulated it pretty well. I don't think you're in any way wrong about overreach and so forth. And none of us have any desire to do more. The city doesn't have excess capacity to do things that, you know, just for the heck of it.
No, and
So the idea is to just make sure we don't have, I mean, I think the visitor industry can talk, people come in and comment about the differential pricing, obviously. So, you know, I'm not saying the city needs to set that whole thing. I mean, maybe your solution about big block letters on a vehicle are perfectly fine. I mean, again, I just want to go back. This needs to be a Sitka solution when we're done, right? We started with Juneau. We started with a code that's out of date, that clearly, I mean, we are operating on the current code, and we have 2 pages of problems that we have with it already. So, I mean, we would like to make this so that we don't have these problems, right? So that's the whole point of this process is to say, because the proposed rules are nowhere in place. Like, they haven't come to the assembly. We haven't said yes to any of this. We aren't trying to do this. But as an example of how you could do this, or how this could be more fair, or one that's been through a sort of the furnace of a bunch of cruise passengers, you know, this is not a bad starting point for thinking about things that we want to see. So they've covered problems we haven't even thought of yet. So those are the kind of things but you're right, this is that process. We put it out there, we're asking for your input. You know, we want solutions to this problem. I really want to know how we fix the taxis. I really want to know. Like, I want to know what it is. Is it we need to charge more? Well, I mean, you've been quite articulate about the fact that people in Sitka don't have spare money laying around.
They can put it up higher, but you can't, if you have a meter, you can't give people a break. It can't take 2 or 3 people. The taxi meters are the worst idea. I'm pretty sure no taxi driver operating will do it. You'll have no taxis. And Uber and Lyft will only come out if they feel like it, if you even let them come. I don't know if it's legal or not. I get 2 different answers.
Sure, go ahead.
When Mr. Leach talks about dispatchers and taxi meters, he seems to be missing the point that we're trying to make, that we need less meddling in our businesses instead of more. Mr. Leach, you told me that I couldn't speak to you unless I made an appointment 2 weeks in advance, and you banned me from the city's email hub. What authority do you have to ban me from talking directly through emails to my elected representatives on the assembly? This is not the Coast Guard, Mr. Leach. You do not rank me.
Okay, so I think the question about dispatching and meters in this particular thing was about gathering data.
More, less regulation,
And
not
we-
more.
and we have
Mr.
that-
Leach looks at it, he's dreaming of rules. Far too much authority under these proposed rules is granted to Chief Robert Beatty.
So we have that down.
Way too much authority.
So we have that.
$1,000,
Lower your voice.
$1,000 fine, year in jail, you're talking? Don't tell me what to do, Brian. You're not the boss here. I want to make sure that I'm heard, that I'm on the record.
Boy, can I hear you.
Well, good.
Yeah, keep
You're
it
the
up.
one that should be listening,
I'm
Brian.
trying to listen, so why don't you get off personal attacks and talk about problem solving here, please.
Go ahead.
The problem is the city meddling in our business.
Okay.
That's the problem.
I want to make sure we kind of circle back to the airport and propose a solution
This is
that
for you, sir.
that would allow the
You don't want it?
the public transit system and shuttle businesses to provide service to and from the airport. I know when the ride, I was working at the Tribe when the ride was first created, and at that time we had multiple companies with multiple cabs running, and it would have just caused such a public problem. It would have been a problem for business, and right now it's caught the fact that we don't have enough taxis and service to the airport is causing an issue for community members, for business travelers, for our government, for of course our visitors as well that are coming. And so I think it's time to make that change and to work with the Tribe and extending the route. To look at is there public funding that we need to be putting towards transportation from our airport, but it's definitely how can we make that accommodation and kind of urgency that we need to find a solution for that.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, I remember that Arrowhead Taxi and Sitka Cabs had a dispatch. It was a working system, but also at that time as a teenager, we had more taxi service and it was probably more feasible to have that. I don't think dispatch is a bad idea if we had enough taxi service to warrant that. The meter thing, I'm gonna say, I think she's correct, because if you get, I'm just gonna throw this out there, you have a single mama, 3 babies, she's been at the ER all night, she doesn't have that kind of cash, she just wants to get home. You can't give her a break if it's on a meter.
I don't know anything about
Yeah.
meters. This is great.
Yeah.
Here,
So I'm just saying, I agree with her in that aspect.
You just don't turn it
But-
on.
You just don't turn it on.
But dispatch, if we could get the feasibility back up in taxi service, that would be great. I also remember as a teenager watching every cab driver get out of their cab, help their customers if they needed help get into the vehicle and put, the groceries in their vehicle. Now I see a taxi driver reach over, pop the trunk, and you do it yourself. So I think, you get your customer service back up, you get more taxis, and if the feasibility's, good. And maybe you only have one dispatch system for all the taxis, and you call one number and that person dispatches the next available taxi cab. I don't know what that real solution would be, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
There's no way that's gonna work.
It
what are
works
you gonna
if we
do? Wait a
wanted
minute, wait,
to.
can I talk? What are
Absolutely.
you gonna say, go get so-and-so, and you're not gonna go get so-and-so because they were a problem last time you went to get them. You can't make people work. There is no business here, everything has changed. Used to have 2 cabs out at night. This town is getting smaller and smaller as far as labor. There's nowhere for them to live, they are leaving town, their coronavirus money's gone. So at this bat, you cannot make people work. So it's just not gonna work. That's what used to work a long time ago. I remember Arrowhead, I used to call him. And then he came over when I was a nurse at the prison. You know what he was doing? He was selling drugs too, and he shot his wife. So, yeah, I remember Arrowhead.
Sorry, Mr. Pike. One of the things that I'm thinking about, and this is kind of harkening back to my days working with the school district, is I know that there are different organizations who have funding available to help people like the single mom. It would be great if there were a central repository for that information where cab companies or whomever who chooses to transport somebody at no fee could submit that information and possibly get reimbursement somewhere down the line. So whether that's from the school district or search or the tribe or somebody else who might have social services funds to cover those costs, it would be great if there was a central way, if we ever explored dispatch, if there were a central way or that somebody could just file a request and say, I transported Laura Rogers to this location and it was this many miles and I'm requesting, $12.44. And that would be one way that maybe when people who do those charitable things could potentially recoup some of their costs, because gas is $5.41 a gallon right now. And I understand that the taxi chart has that above $5, but the reality is I'm not positive, given the cost of living and the way wages have increased, that it's really compensating people adequately.
A lot of people that don't have money don't qualify for social services. They're not even capable of applying. We're dealing with a lot of people that are barely functioning, and I try to give them some, it's just not gonna work that we can turn in. I don't have any time to turn all this stuff in. There's just me. There's just a few companies, a couple of them don't have anybody else they work with. Wait, are you gonna run out of business? That's what you're going to do. You can't make people work unless you want to take over the taxi business in town.
Well, certainly the city doesn't want that.
Well, running them out, having too many regulations, making it too hard to hire people, having fantasies about what's going on now, what's going on in June is not going on here.
So what is the solution to the taxi problem? I think that is the number one thing that comes up quickly.
Well, quit over-regulating and let the companies that are functioning stay the way they are and make it easier for cabs to function. Quit. It functioned before. You don't want them to do tours and taxi. Well, okay, I want them. I'll just do tours.
I think one thing with the taxis too is that we have to recognize the fact that it is so different in the summer than it is during any season. And I work at the tourism desk out front here, and it's just complete gridlock. You can't take the ride, you can't take a taxi, all the tours are booked. And on a day like tomorrow, when there's over 9,000 people, there's just nothing that people can do. So I think that part of the taxi problem is part of like a larger problem of transportation. And I'm not sure if that's something the city can do, or if it's up to the private sector, but doing something, especially if we're going to be seeing more of these big, 8,000, 9,000 person days to work for, transporting, getting the tourists around, so that the locals can utilize things like the taxis, like the ride, and the tourists can still get to where they want to go. And I'm not sure if, on days where our population is doubled, if that's something that's even plausible for Sitka, but it's something that, if these summers continue, that would be good to try to look towards some solutions for that, because I feel like what we're doing right now is just not the most sustainable. And the summers are just kind of exacerbating the problems that we're seeing.
I think that kind of answers, if we can go hand in hand, if we can have tour options for the people, and we can limit the fees that we charge the tour operators, because we're going to gain that tax revenue from the people. So I think if we can all come together, that's the key right there. Instead of us versus you or you versus us, let's find the solution and work together to fix the problem and make Sitka that great place and make it a great opportunity. People that are coming here absolutely love it. The people that come on our tour, we went to such and such a place last time, it got canceled. We came to Sitka and said, we love Sitka. Sitka's fantastic. Well, it's great for us, Tourism's great for us. It's a great economy booster, I don't know about everybody else, but a couple years ago, I took 5 people on tour the entire summer. Can't do that again. So if we can all work together, let's keep that in mind and work together and come up with an actual solution. This is a great way of doing that, and let's all work together.
And the other piece is, I don't think that everybody recognizes the fact that these cruise ship people come one day, but we literally had a busload of people today that were talking about coming back again. How do I book something where we can stay for a week? The cruise thing is a short-term thing, and I recognize that we're probably seeing this boom post-COVID because people put off their bucket lists. But the reality is, I think if they have a good experience here, they're going to think about coming back and being those longer-term stay guests who actually spend a lot more money. So this is an investment in our future, and I just think we need to be thoughtful about how we're doing it so we maximize this opportunity.
I probably hear that every day. Wait, there's an airport, we can
Yes.
fly right in and spend
Yes.
a week? I
They
hear
can't
that.
believe that 8,500 people, a town of 8,500 has an airport. They're actually amazed. They're like, well, yeah, how the heck do you think we get anywhere if we don't have an airport?
My same boat where I've had people 3 times in 5 years come back 3 different times. Year after year after year, they want to come back, they love Sitka. Let's just keep them coming back.
Can I ask a question to you all for consideration? Please don't take this as I want this solution, because I know police and fire is probably not going to want to take this on, but hearing from the people in the room, what if there was a taxi commission or a transportation commission made up of citizens and users and providers as yourself, to go to every, I don't know, if rates, let's say rates are regulated, or if rates need to change, where is that voice, who is that board that people can talk to? I mean, I don't know if the assembly table is the appropriate place, but is a commission the appropriate route? What do you all think of that idea?
I think that gives us a voice that I think sometimes we feel we don't have. I think, I'm not a taxi operator, but I myself, for my guests, even yesterday, I had 2 guests who wanted to get to the airport, and they spent 8 hours calling taxis. Nobody would answer.
So raise your hand. Can we see a show of hands of somebody, if you're interested, looking into the idea of a commission?
Into what?
Looking into the idea of a
Transportation commission.
I don't know what, that's too vague, doesn't make any sense.
It's
I
a
like the
volunteer,
idea.
a group of volunteers from the public who
I
is.
like her idea, just deregulate it totally. You can put your fares up there, it doesn't even have to be the same. The less you regulate, the more taxis you'll get.
I think a lot of folks for that one, so.
Okay, go ahead.
I still think the idea, I agree, I like the idea of public affairs and being transparent, but I also like the idea, I understand that some of this is arising because of complaints and concerns that have come to the city administrator's office, the police department, all of those pieces, and I think having some kind of regulatory body where people who are actually part of that industry had a voice, or were able to field some of that and then pass them on when necessary, would probably be way better than just being reactionary and expecting folks who weren't necessarily involved to solve all the problems. Because you're gonna do it through regulation.
Yeah, maybe an assembly member that we could talk to.
An ad hoc person, yeah.
I like assembly because they're elected.
Well, commissions usually have a.
Yeah, the commission will have.
They always have
Divisions will be
one.
elected.
They always have a liaison.
I know this is all very hypothetical, would the commission, is this an idea of like a commission specifically for like tourism transportation with like representatives, or like the representatives from like from like ACT or from like different taxis, or is it for just like transportation point blank, like year round in Sitka?
It's whatever you want it to be, really. It is. I mean, when the assembly forms a commission, we kind of set what we want them to do, what are their tasks, what are their routine duties, and we can also say the assembly can also specify these are the groups that we want represented here. This is the board membership that we want. These are the number of liaisons we want. So that can be built with whatever this group wants. I would imagine you want somebody from the tourism sector, you want somebody from the taxi sector, you want bus drivers, all of them there. But it's another layer of government. I'm going to throw that out there. It is another board. It is another commission. But I wanted to at least discuss that idea.
I think less layers would be more taxis, more people doing it. The less you regulate, the more stuff you're gonna have. The more people are gonna be happy. I mean, there's the telling someone they have to have 2 taxis out 24/7 in this town can't possibly happen. There is no business. In the middle of the night, you get somebody that's really mad. At 3 a.m., they're mad. They went somewhere, it didn't work out, and they're mad. Who's gonna pick them up? Who's gonna stay out all night? You can't hire someone to have a regular job. They're not gonna sit all, 4 people are not gonna sit out all night taking that person anywhere. If they do call, they won't answer. They'll learn who not to answer. You don't answer everybody.
I think just the barrier of entry needs to be addressed as well. Like we went through this with the whole the tourism thing. With the fees that were assessed, with the outcry auction for the squares outside. I think just the barriers of entry for a taxi operator, for a tour operator, I think they're increasingly becoming more and more difficult. Fortunately, in the company that I'm representing in this body, we were in a position to play by the rules, if you will, and pay the $20,000 that it took to license or permit all of my vehicles to operate for the summer. But somebody, and granted, we're blessed to be able to do that, but it's just, I think we're to a point where we're at a precipice where the city the community cannot accommodate what we're trying to achieve. Tomorrow is a prime example of that. We know that the 12,000 people that are going to be in town tomorrow is not good. We all can see that. We all know that. But the barriers of entry, Laura she didn't even bother to bid for anything here. She avoided Centennial Hall at all costs because of the barrier of entry. She didn't want to participate in allowing her service to accommodate anything with Centennial Hall because of the cost to play ball. So I think, again, no one's not willing to pay, but I think anyway, we just need to be better about it.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have to disagree with picking people up in the middle of the night. Somebody needs to do it. Whether the person in the middle of the night is getting off work, the person in the middle of the night needing a ride home from the hospital, the person in the middle of the night is in a situation that is bad for them and they're trying to leave. So the solution is, yeah, we need more taxis, and we need taxis that are gonna pick up those people in the middle of the night, no matter the situation. As an operator, you have the right to refuse that service, but there's gotta be somebody that is gonna be reliable, because these people, the ones that are in the bad situation because it didn't work out, they're drinking, they need to get home. You're just gonna leave them stranded because they're angry? Who cares? We gotta put our big girl pants on, and we gotta get the job done, because it is a matter of public safety, no matter how you look at it. The people that need to be picked up also need to feel safe.
This is clearly a big problem, because I mean, kind of what I'm hearing through the course of tonight is there's a big problem getting enough people to have taxis. There's a big problem getting enough taxis. Some of them, I'm hearing, are related to regulations and processes, and I think we've heard that loud and clear a couple of meetings now. But then, you know, I am very interested in a solution to how we get more taxis on the road. How do we get more people involved? Is it a financial issue? Is it so I guess that's my question.
I like that one.
Go ahead.
At least what I've seen here tonight is that there are 2 basic problems. We have one problem, which is the overall transportation of what I'll call Sitkans. And that is a year-round thing, where people of the community need to be transported, whether at 2 a.m. or in the winter or whatever. And that's, we'll call it the taxi problem. The other problem is the seasonal problem. And what is amazing is that it was just said, you know, like tomorrow, the community can't accommodate. What is the most important thing that Southern California has? Well, most of the time, good weather. People wake up and say another perfect day. And that means predictability, reliability. One, we are not getting numbers from the cruise lines. Maybe you are, but they should be published. Those are proprietary information things. We have Alaska Coach. It would be nice to get their people number and how many they're dropping off. We need to have a sense of what the problem is. But overall, the bottom line is we are not controlling the input. Yet we as Sitkans can control the input to make this problem, one, controllable, and better to just workable. And the other thing is, those individuals who are bringing the people in maybe need a hand in putting up more money to allow some of these transportations issues to be addressed. And I think these are all soluble. But what's happening is we have an uncontrollable input. And now this is what happened at the beginning of this whole conversation a year ago, 2 years ago. And nobody wishes to start from the beginning and build an infrastructure. What we allowed to happen was to have a deluge, the tsunami. So the question is, when we approach this, taxis is one issue. Taxis are one issue. And the seasonal is another issue. And each of them have separate solutions.
I wanted to say something. I got robbed one night of $500. It's not all that safe. I don't really think ladies should be driving it. That's just my opinion. I've had some really bad experiences. Got robbed of $500. So that's just one thing that happened. The other things have happened. So I'm going to not work in the middle of the night. And you can't make somebody stay awake all night, sit out there with no business, that will pick up one person.
Makes sense.
So I do believe in regulation, and I do think that new regulations need to be implemented and streamlined in order for this tourism industry to be, and the transportation to be safe and effective. But I do think that there needs to be consideration, a certain amount of flexibility as far as what taxi drivers, tour operators, shuttles are able to offer. Because I think that is the bottom line as far as my experience, as far as the money piece of it. If you're only driving taxi on a metered system, as it's been mentioned many times here, it's very hard to make a living. I mean, most people aren't going to do that. But if you're able to augment that with tours, you're going to do the 4 a.m. airport drop-off, and then you're going to have a tour in the middle of the day, and then you're going to do, various other things throughout the course of the day and mix it up. I mean, I think that piecing those different pieces together and being flexible as far as what is being allowed, as far as it's within, the regulations that the city put forth. I mean, I think that's the way that the small businesses, I mean, I'm not talking about the huge tour operators, but the small businesses are going to be able to make it and make a living. And maybe you might see other interests,
Well, I think one of the surprise takeaways from me tonight is it actually doesn't sound like we have as much of a capacity problem in terms of transporting people as we have a problem with capacity in the right places.
Exactly.
And in the right categories and the right sort of things. And I'm in favor of complex regulations that allow the flexibility that you're talking about, but they are going to be a lot more complicated than a simple this category does this category does that, this category does this, which is why Juneau went that route, I suspect. It was a lot easier to control that and understand it and make it simple and keep everyone safe. But no, I mean, I'm surprised to hear that. There's quite a bit of capacity in our system. There's plenty of seats. They're just not going the right places at the right time. They're not available in the right areas in the right moments. If we can find a way to combine everything that we do, that is a very Sitkan way of doing things, right? Like that's how we solve problems. But I mean, we're just adding to a whole bunch of more layers on this thing in terms of making sure that, I'm not interested in I'm not interested in over-regulating, but I also don't want a free-for-all, so.
Right.
Maybe you could consider reaching out to some of the cab drivers who you have records for that have left the industry the last couple of years and get their feedback, because there's a lot of feedback beyond what's happened in the room. And there are very basic, simple reasons why the 3 prominent cab drivers I know that moved on from it, and I'm sure they'd be happy to share that with you. None of them live in town anymore. The question that people keep asking me is, why was there this recent thing of separating out tours and taxis and having to have separate vehicles and separate signage? No one understands that. Is there anyone in the room that can just answer that question of what the logic was of separating it?
It's not allowed by code already. I think we've over the years have not, enforcement could have been better over the year. I mean, this has been in place, that code has been in place for over 20 years, I think, and it was just kind of ignored for a very long time. And then you get this perfect storm too, when more and more people want to use the resources. You know, you're all business people, and I expect you to do what makes the most money for you. So when there's that ambiguity, and there's a lack of enforcement, and then there's a whole lot more people coming in, it makes sense that you're gonna choose the one that makes you the most profit at that moment. You know, from the city's perspective, my dream world is I want any person to be able to pick up the phone at any time and call and ask for a cab and be able to get it. And with a reasonable amount of wait, they can say, hey, we're busy, I can be there in 20 minutes or something like that. That's, if I could get one thing out of this whole talk, is that would be my desire. And I think most of the citizens would want that too. But I think, and there was a lot of misinterpretation on what went out, and I know Chief Beatty sent out a follow-up letter to that. Nobody was saying thou shalt get a new vehicle if you want to do this. It's that, Mary, right? We talked at that last police and fire meeting, and I gave an example. If I'm you know, John Leach, who just stepped off the bus out front, I know nothing about Sitka. I wanna ride to the Fortress of the Bears. I don't even know it's the Fortress of the Bear. I just call it the Bear Place, right? I walk outside and I see a vehicle out there that says taxi on the top of it. And I walk up to that vehicle and say, could I get a taxi ride to the Bear Place? And if that person gets an answer that's, I don't do taxis right now, but for, I don't know, $150, I'll give you a tour down there and I'll wait for you and all these great things, like that all makes sense. But in their mind, they see a taxi sign and they think they're getting a taxi. So that's what we were trying to clear up. It's code says it's one or the other, but we want to fix that in here too.
Before they get in and go anywhere, I go over it 3 times what I'm doing. 3 times I tell them the fare. It's not bait and switch. Bait and switch would be like if I took them out there, oh, by the way, we were doing a tour and now you owe me $150. I'm gonna hang out and wait for you. Or maybe I'll just sleep in here. No, it doesn't matter. They know what looks like people are doing transportation. They come up and go, can I get a ride? They don't care what the decorations are. They don't care if you have the taxi thing on. They just want a ride, and they can tell who's giving rides. And that's not bait and switch. Bait and switch is if you get them in there and trick them. I go over it 3 times. I don't want any problems. And I give a first class, what I'm doing right now, people just love it. They can take their wheelchair, I wait for them. They don't have any problem, they don't miss their shuttle out there. They really like what I do. And I could dart over to the airport and get somebody in between, but it's just gotten to be too much. It's not gonna go over there, and it's not TSA, it's somebody else that's causing the problem. TSA has no problem at all. So I think he was a little mixed up.
It's interesting that so many of the early listeners mentioned Uber and Lyft, because my experience with Uber and Lyft all over down south is that the price is not set, it's graduated based on wait times. And it can be exuberant. And do we really want more Lyft and Uber here? Maybe we do in the summer.
When I was in W, I had to use Uber and Lyft. You could not get a cab, they wouldn't come there. I had important eye appointments to go to. I offered the hotel clerk $100 to take me 2 miles. Uber and Lyft only come out if they feel like it. They have a star rating, they rate you. If you don't tip, you don't get a good rating, they won't pick you up. It's not nobody's gonna do it here, you're not gonna make any money. They might do it in the middle of summer. I can guarantee they're not coming out at 12 a.m. in the middle of the night. That's not gonna be a solution here, except in the summer somebody can make money. They don't pay city sales tax as far as I know, and I don't know what they do about the insurance. And they don't even get, they don't even go to the police. They operate independent, as far as I know, operate independently of the police. So that's not gonna be any great solution. And I still don't know if it's legal or not to do it.
On the topic of Uber and Lyft, I personally use it a lot down south, and I've not had similar experiences to Mary. It actually works great for me. I think the only issue with it being here would be finding drivers. I mean, if we can't find enough cab drivers, I don't know what's going to motivate people to drive for Uber, to drive for Lyft. So yeah, I mean, it would be a great solution if we could, again, find drivers, or if there were some like incentives to get people to drive for that, but yeah, it's a similar issue with both of them as it is to getting people to drive for cabs. So.
Someone mentioned, folks needing a ride home from Search, and it was quite a few years ago that Search started their own shuttle service. They have their own 24-hour day shuttle service. There is, one of the things that no one mentioned is we are a community. It is great to have 24-hour service, but we're a community. No one's talking about talking up having a designated driver. 10 years ago when Mothers Against Drunk Drivers was so prominent, you heard about that all the time. People made more of a plan. We're a little community. Only when I know there's no cab drivers available, if I'm at the airport, when I leave the airport for any reason, I call out and say, hey, does anybody need a ride across the bridge? If I'm coming home from a friend's house or taking someone, if someone looks like they have too many groceries or whatever, I offer rides all the time. Everybody I know offers rides all the time. But the designated driver aspect of things, we can't regulate individuals. The city can't be responsible for individuals' responsibility. If you're gonna go out and have a good time, you should have a plan. And maybe there's some PR aspect of that. Maybe there could, even as simple as flyers in the bathroom. Who's your designated driver tonight? You should have your own backup plan. In a perfect world, yes, we should have cab drivers 24 hours a day like most bigger towns. But in the years that I've had a cab license, I didn't use it very much, but I did have it years ago, and my family and my close friends have all been drivers. Many of them have been drivers, and I've seen the ins and outs and the waiting around, and it's a rough business. It's a hard way to make a living, and what we touched on in the beginning, but we barely talked about, is the rate increases. It's been the set rates for, correct me if I'm wrong, 15 years. That's a long time.
And they're having people that are cab drivers under the table. They're not getting any tax on that or anything. They're just paying their friends to drive them, which I don't even.
Oh, and I don't take any money for the rides I get, just so you know.
They're just paying their friends to drive them around. So the city's missing out on that tax. It seems like they really like their tax, but.
I'm sorry. Tax is not my goal here at all. Revenue is not my goal here at all. I think it's very admirable what you do, right? If you go outside, you say, who needs a ride across the bridge? But Mary, you yourself just said you were robbed for $500 at one point.
$500 robbed.
But if the city's not involved here, that's that public safety piece. That is the main concern that I have, because what if that same person that robbed you of $500 was the person that was going to rob AJ, and she didn't know that? She was just trying to be kind to him. Or if that person that can't get a ride in the middle of the night walks home because that's the safest thing. It's dark here in the wintertime, and you can get smacked by a car on the side of HPR. Those are the public safety things that I'm concerned about. And anything we can do to help, but tax revenue and the fee, that is the lowest priority for me. The revenues are only there just to administer the programs. That's it. A city's a nonprofit organization. We don't want to make profit. Any profit we make, we want to give back to you all in improvements here.
Have you thought about protecting us? Because I did get robbed at $500, and I've had some other things happen. And I don't even bother calling the police. What are they supposed to do about it? I just don't see what they can do about it. I got robbed out there where they do fish out there.
So if I could just interject one thing. So one of the bigger problems seem to be, especially for locals, but even for people coming in on late flights, the nighttime issue. And I understand a lot of people who have taxis or during the day, you can't be doing it 24/7. And so my thought was, what if I think we need to address ride sharing in anything, because it's probably going to come eventually. But do you think it would be a good solution to encourage ride sharing to come to Sitka, specifically to help with, it wouldn't be just for the evening, but focus on to help relieve that nighttime issue. Maybe someone who has a day job just wants to, they're a night owl, and they're up for 4 hours, and they thought, well, I'll just ride and get some money.
They're not going to show up either. They're not going to come out and go over that airport and make $10 in the middle of the night. They're not coming. They're not gonna say that, you can't get a taxi driver or someone to go over there, they're not coming. It doesn't matter if they're here or not, I think they've been here all along. I've heard people say they're calling Lyft and stuff, and then they call me back. They want, even just a few days ago, they said, never mind, don't come, I called Lyft. And then they called me back, Lyft can't locate a driver. I said, that's been going on for as long as I know. Hank worked for Uber, as far as I know, and said it wasn't worth it. It's just not gonna help much. And don't make any money, you'd be better off doing anything else than going over the airport in the middle of the night. Lyft makes some money right now running over to the Bears, but.
Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't have, we get that a lot because we don't have Lyft or Uber. So the app just says that they're coming, but they're not coming because they don't exist.
No, they're not ever gonna come.
Never. Yeah, so it's not like the fault of like the app or rideshare in and of itself, it's just that Sitka doesn't have any.
Right,
So
so
that's
who's surging?
Yeah, that's just like the default.
Right.
Well, one of the things I was gonna say, Tim, when we had up here explore dispatch, maybe we don't even have something as elaborate as a person who's dispatching. It'd be great, I mean, one of the things that I could think of, if I knew I was gonna be busy and that Monday night, I'm the person who's handling the 11 o'clock flight or 11:59 or whatever, then it would be worth me taking my bus over there and charging whatever per person and then bringing people back and staying up till midnight. So if there were ways that the city or that taxi transportation commission that Kevin threw out
No,
there.
that was John.
Okay, John threw out there. I don't know, you guys have wonderful ideas. The reality is, if there were a way to structure it so you knew you would be busy, maybe that would alleviate people, instead of 7 different people sitting at home waiting for a call, maybe that would guarantee revenue for that night, for that group, and we're 8,500 people. We ought to have some small town solutions to some of these problems.
Absolutely.
So if we can't explore a dispatcher, maybe because I'll tell you, I don't want to stay up till midnight, but if this would be a solution to not having folks at the airport, I'd be happy to do the Aspen run if I knew I were the person for Monday night. And that even if the city told me I can only charge $7 a person, okay, I'll run them all to the Aspen for $7 a head. So if we structured something, I think we could come up with a solution, but I mean, we have to all be willing to buy into the idea that some structure is better than what's happening currently. Better for us and better for people.
I would like to respectfully disagree on the ride share because I've actually heard people say, if Uber and Lyft were here, I would do it for the 6 a.m. flight, the 7 a.m. flight, or I would do it after work to get some extra money in my pocket. It's a lot easier, it would be a lot easier than going and spending a couple hours at a cash register at a grocery store. So I do think that it would be worth exploring that option because I've heard people say they would do it.
They've been here all along.
I would like to agree. It's a side hustle. That's what it is. If somebody's driving for Uber or Lyft, that's a side hustle. I would do it on my time off. You're gonna make tips from it. And the convenience of it, of just pulling out an app on your phone and being able to schedule a ride several days in advance, or just pushing a button and being like, hey car, come get me right now. And somebody will come and they will do it. And we don't need to have 1,000 Lyft drivers on the road, but just having a few would be great. And as a local, I would love to use Uber and Lyft. I'm sure we all love to go to Ludwig's and have a glass of wine. So I would love to use Uber or Lyft, or I mean, even a cab, to go home after that and not have to depend on my friend or my partner to be the DD for that.
Yeah, Uber and Lyft are a dead-end street. They're now asking 35 to 50% of the fare. That leaves that's more than my profit margin when I field a driver in a car, insure it, pay for the fuel, and upkeep and maintenance. That's all the profit is going to Lyft and Uber, and all the expenses are going to the driver. So the driver's basically working for nothing but tips.
And in Juneau, you have long fares. That might work for Uber. Who's gonna get up at 11 o'clock very often, go through and the roads aren't safe at night, you know, in the middle of winter, they're snowy. It's just, it's not gonna work. And they've been here, as far as I know, forever. I've heard people trying to call them out here. And do they or do they not have to pay city sales tax? This needs to be answered by maybe our lawyer.
They do have to pay city sales tax.
But they're not paying it.
Anybody that's registered as a business has to pay city sales tax.
Okay, I don't believe they're paying it because they've been here.
Now, we have,
We had that
and this
one,
is
they just
important to
called
talk
it
about,
working.
like, we have Turo here, I'm sure many of you know about Turo. There's a city regulation, I think it's 4% tax you're supposed to pay that Avis pays as a rental agency. Turo won't pay that, you know, it's well, we're not in Sitka, we're the company over here. Talk to the independent drivers about that. We went through the same thing with Airbnb and VRBO. It's like, we don't need to pay that bad. We're not here. So there's always somebody trying to find a way around that. But ultimately, the business is going to pay sales tax on their business
Well, we've had
profit.
Are they paying the tax then? I've seen them.
I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I don't even know who the driver is. Like, no, we never get a check that says this is from Lyft. Here's my sales tax. It would be whoever the Lyft driver is. And there is one. I don't know the person's name, but.
My understanding is they were told to cease and desist by the police. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what
I'm
I
not
was
sure,
told.
did that,
Yeah.
can we talk about that?
Yeah,
I know that, I'm learning a lot about this process too. Mr. Hanson and I, we've talked to some council about what rideshare regulations are out there because they're not technically within the municipalities' taxi codes. They're more state and federally regulated, and because they'll say all day long they're not a taxi, but there's a lot to learn there. That's the best answer I can give
If
you.
I could just interject here, to answer your question, if they're not paying, they should be. I'm not actually aware of a history of ride-sharing people being in town. I think that's a relatively new thing. So that's why, as we do this, I think it would be wise to include the ride-sharing in the ordinance so that we can actually put something in there specifically to require them on paper to pay that. But if a person just started, we don't know if they're paying
Hank
or not.
worked for Uber and said it wasn't worth it. Remember Hank, the black guy?
Remember Hank?
He said it wasn't worth it.
So are there other solutions that we're missing here?
So you guys, before I put forth the idea, I do want to say that I see on the police blotter on a regular basis that police officers are taking people home because they were inebriated and needed help. And that's great. That's what should happen in a small town. And I think the PD does a great job, especially considering how understaffed they are. But with the tourism discussions, last spring, there was the whole bathroom incentive program of businesses. Maybe it would be possible to incentivize bars and restaurants to having their own shuttles. There's not that many people that do need a ride home. You know, if the city is going to help in some way, having a public bathroom available to tourists is, to me, not that far. I mean, that was a brilliant idea to accommodate more tourists. If the late at night driving is always going to be a problem. It always has been.
Well, in Anchorage, they have a program called Ride for Free. And if you're drunk, you can tell the bartender, and the bartender will call and get you a taxi home. And it's a program that is supported between federal grant, I think there's government grants, I don't know what government grants, CHAR, which is the Cabaret and Hotel Owners Association, and then the bar owners themselves all have come together and they've created this fund that will fund getting people home for free. So that is already in place in Anchorage.
Awesome.
You still need drivers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It could actually be rather than a taxi here, it would be under the responsibility of the business owner to get their patrons home when necessary.
I think we're winding down here. Go ahead.
You can talk about funding these projects all you want, but the fact of the matter remains that there's no night drivers out there to hire. I can't make people work. People don't want to work. But you can't make people serve on this police department. They can't fill their ranks. The ferry can't fill their ranks. how do you can say you have to have 24-hour service. I work 12, 14 hours a day. The last night I went home, first I went over to the airport and I got 4 or 5 elderly people over there that couldn't get a ride from the Aspen's exclusive contractor. But I went and got them anyway, and then I went home, my phone rang for hours. There wasn't a single cab on the road. I can't make people drive at night. If people don't want to work, I can't make them work. Any more than the police department or the ferry system. People don't want to work, they don't want to work. There's nothing to be done about that. All the fancy regulations and ordinances that you dream up are only going to make our lives more complicated, and they're not going to change anything. They're going to change things for the worse. If you start requiring meters and dispatchers, I don't need a dispatcher, I have a cell phone. So what's good? How can I afford to hire a dispatcher? I can't even get somebody to drive cab at night. Nothing's going to change. We need to be left alone so these problems can sort themselves out. All the intervention is just going to make things complicated. All the taxi drivers are going to quit.
Yeah, we've heard that tonight. Thank you. Anything else? Hey, I want to thank you very much. This has been an awesome conversation to be a part of. Learned a huge amount. And I think we have some good ideas to go forward with. I look forward to further conversations about this. I think this is a crucial topic for Sitka. You're hear loud and clear that Sitkans are struggling with transportation, as well as how the visitor industry impacts us is definitely causing a problem. I am encouraged by the conversation, however. I heard a lot of good things tonight. Thank you very much.
Do we know when the next, is it going